So one of the survivors of the crash involving the car of Duduzane Zuma says the former president's son was speeding on the day of the 2014 collision. Matron Mdakane also laid bare in the Randburg Magistrate's Court how she witnessed the death of one of the taxi passengers, Phumzile Dube. Zuma is facing one count of culpable homicide and negligent driving after the state withdrew the other for the death of Nanke Mashaba. He has pleaded not guilty. To discuss this further, we're joined in the studio now by SABC reporter Chriselda Lewis. Chriselda has been covering this. So let's just first, I'm actually thinking about the tweet that you sent earlier on where you were calling out to him and asking him, Duduzane, how do you feel today? Yeah. And he definitely ignored, or at least, managed to sidestep your question. And I'm thinking, do you think he had an inkling then that one of the charges was going to be dropped?
That's very difficult to say, Tepiso, but I did get an indication yesterday that the state had a bit of a problem with the second count of culpable homicide. Now, this would be related, as you indicated, to the death of Nanke Mashaba. So what has now transpired, the state says it would not be able to proceed on that particular charge on the basis that pathologists seem to have ruled that even though Nanke Mashaba had spent some time in hospital after the accident, she had died as a result of a pre-existing condition. So the state believes it would not have been successful in the prosecution in terms of that second count, but they believe that they can proceed on the first count that's relating to the death of Phumzile Dube. You'd recall in 2014 there was an inquest into the death of Phumzile Dube, and that inquest had found that Duduzane was negligent and reckless.
The state said that it was unaware of the pre-existing condition. So just take us through that statement by the prosecutor. Well,
State Prosecutor Yusuf Barber basically said, I got an indication yesterday that the state didn't seem comfortable proceeding with that second count. And I think on the basis that you've had a finding already on the incident relating to Phumzile Dube, the state does seem that, or does believe that it would be successful in that particular aspect of the prosecution.
So take us through some of the witnesses that appeared in court today and some of their testimonies, Chriselda.
Well, Tepis, I think one of the most interesting witnesses who took the stand today, state witness, was one of the survivors of that crash in February 2014. Matron basically indicated that she had in the taxi when the accident occurred, and she went into grave detail about how the accident happened, and she claimed that Duduzane Zuma was speeding on that particular day. She had heard that the car was braking from quite afar, but the defense really tried to discredit that evidence because they indicated that she'd never given that statement to police. So she maintains that on that day, while it had been raining, she saw Duduzane Zuma's car just fling past them, and even though weather conditions had there'd been a slight rain at some point, and at some point it had been raining quite heavily, she believes that he was speeding. And I think one of the other evidence that might corroborate that would be the taxi driver who also took the stand. The taxi driver who was behind the wheel on that fateful day. He indicated that it had not been raining that heavily. Remember, Duduzane Zuma's defense is that it had been raining heavily on that day, and he had basically hit a water puddle. And that's how then his car spun out of control, and that's how the accident happened. He also claimed that there was poor visibility on the day. But the taxi driver says, yes, it was raining, but there was no poor visibility on that particular day as far as he can remember. So, I think when the entire gallery started hearing details of what one of the survivors had told the court, where she found, for example, Phumzile Dube, parts of her body had been hanging out of the taxi window, and how one of the ladies who was also in that taxi had basically been shouting out, Sis Phumzile, don't do this. In other words, could you please get up and Matron basically told her that she is no more. So this is, you know, sort of we're getting a sense of what the scene had been like on that particular day.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So then we also had a Porsche come in and testify.
Yeah.
What was the relevance of that testimony?
The relevance of that Tsepiso is that the state would have wanted to prove that on the charge of negligent driving, they were trying to basically push to say that the vehicle that Duduzane Zuma was driving did have the necessary features, safety features, for him to have avoided what took place on that day. Now, bringing in the dealer principal at Porsche in Johannesburg, he also detailed, you know, the history of the service that the car had been through, by trying to indicate that the car had been sufficiently serviced and that on that particular day, you know, there was no fault with Duduzane Zuma's car, but instead he was reckless in the manner in which he had conducted himself on the road that particular day.
Thank you very much, Chriselda, bringing home to you the events in the Randburg Magistrate's Court today. Of course, we will unpack what the legal implications of this are. Lots of Twitter users asking, what does pre-existing condition mean and how does that implicate on this case? So let's take you back to Stephen now.